Every now and then in the true crime community, you'll hear stories of people who disappeared in national parks. These disappearances are usually very strange and involve the person disappearing seemingly without a trace. Today's case didn't happen at a national park, but it does involve a boy who went missing while camping and who hasn't been seen for almost 46 years. Let's talk about Kurt Newton. Kurt Ronald Newton was born on July 28, 1971, to parents Ronald and Jill Newton. He was also welcomed by older sister Kimberly. Kurt grew up in Manchester, Maine, close-ish to the southern part of the state. As a young child, he was described by a neighbor as the loveliest, sweetest towhead kid you ever saw. Mother Jill said he had a sweet face, but worried he might be a bit too attached to her. Kurt was very shy and never liked to be too far from his mom's side for too long. He also didn't like going into the woods. One day when he wouldn't go in with his sister, he told his mom that it was because there were monsters in there. Over Labor Day weekend of 1975, the Newtons decided to take a family camping trip. They traveled to Natanis Point Campground, a remote area in Chain of Ponds Township, just a few miles from the Maine-Quebec border. No doubt, 4-year-old Kurt and 6-year-old Kimberly should have had a great time on this trip, but that Sunday morning, things took a turn. I found a few different time frames for when Kurt might have last been seen, but they all fell between 10 and 11 on Sunday morning. Kurt's mom was washing a pair of his muddy shoes. It had rained a lot that weekend and there was a lot of mud in the area. His sister was playing and his dad was going to get firewood. A neighboring camper said Kurt called out for his dad as he pedaled in that direction on his tricycle. Most sources say the last person to see Kurt was 11-year-old Lou Ellen Hansen. She called out to him asking if he knew where his parents were, but he didn't answer her and kept on pedaling. Less than an hour later, Kurt's tricycle was found undamaged on a steep rise by a dump site just under a mile from the campground. The tricycle was found by John Hansen, a volunteer caretaker at the campground, and Lou Ellen Hansen's father. At the time, he didn't think much of it. Nobody realized Kurt was missing yet, so he figured a kid had just left it there. He brought it back to the campsite, and Kurt's mother started to get concerned. She asked campers if they had seen Kurt, but none of them had. When she learned his tricycle had been found at a dump site, she said, "My God, someone's taken him." Kurt was reported missing by the campground owner around 12:22 p.m. From here, investigators embarked on what would come to be known as the biggest search in Maine's history. All the roads and trails within a 5-mile radius of the camp, the dump and its surrounding areas, and the campground and buildings on or near it were all searched multiple times. Military helicopters and bloodhounds were brought in, but they didn't find much. No traces of Kurt were found in the area where his tricycle had been located. If he'd been walking around in the area, his shoes should have made easily visible prints in the wet sand, but none were found. The road just beyond the dump wasn't really conducive to walking. It was overgrown with bushes and trees, including trees that had fallen across the road, so it's not likely he went this way. No tricycle tracks were found on the road either, but that's presumably because the wheels of his tricycle were smooth. Just before dark on the night of the 31st, Jill Newton thought she heard a child's voice in the woods near the dump. She called out to Kurt for about 15 minutes, but never got an answer. Other searchers didn't find anything either. Ronald Newton told investigators that he and a friend would be calling out for Kurt every hour from different areas for the rest of the night. That night, temperatures were below freezing. Kurt couldn't have survived very long if he was outside with no shelter. The next day, dogs caught a scent of Kurt's pajamas, but nothing else. Sometime early on in the investigation, Ronald Newton hurt his ankle, and after that he was limited in what he could do, but he continued to call out for his son every night. The search was officially called off on September 12th. Altogether, more than 3,000 searchers had traveled 20,000 miles and spent over 2,000 hours looking for Kurt, but they'd found very little. In addition to the searches, everyone who had been at the campground at the time was interviewed. One camper claimed she saw a white station wagon at the campground just before Kurt was last seen. According to her, the station wagon drove away so fast it left a cloud of dust behind. No white station wagons were registered at the campground, and nobody else had seen it. And investigators, at least at the time, didn't suspect foul play. They thought Kurt had probably left the campsite and gotten lost coming back, said State Police Lieutenant G. Paul Falconer. From the beginning, we never discounted the possibility that Kurt was abducted, but there are no facts to indicate he's not in the woods. According to State Police Detective Richard Cook, who is head of the investigation at the time, with so many children available in the cities, why would a kidnapper come to one of the most remote campgrounds in the state, hoping to find a child riding a tricycle alone down a deserted road? But Kurt's parents still thought he had been abducted, possibly taken to Canada. They stayed in the area for 2 more weeks before returning to Manchester. About 2 years later, when Kurt would have been starting school, they mailed his missing persons poster to every school district in the country. This process took about 6 months and cost over $5,000. Some of the schools replied with pictures of students who looked like Kurt. Police investigated these leads, but none of them led anywhere. There have been several reported sightings of Kurt over the years, but none of them have been confirmed to be him. One man said he saw a boy matching Kurt's description while camping in the Canadian Rockies. That same week, 2 waitresses claimed to spot a boy matching his description in their restaurant in Vermont. That boy was eventually found, and it wasn't Kurt. About 4 months after Kurt had disappeared, there had been another reported sighting in New Orleans. This boy was very shy, just like Kurt, and only answered to names with a K sound. That boy was later identified and also was not Kurt. After an article about Kurt's disappearance was published in an issue of Yankee magazine in 1979, even more people came forward claiming they'd seen Kurt, but none of these leads panned out either. This case briefly got some social media attention back in 2017 when a woman claimed to be Jennifer Klein. Jennifer Klein was 3 years old when she disappeared from Moab, Utah on May 25, 1974. Like Kurt, she was camping with her family, and there's speculation that she fell into the Colorado River and drowned. This woman, who claimed to be Jennifer Klein, said she was abducted by members of a satanic cult who had also kidnapped Kurt Newton, as well as Aiden Pates. Aiden Pates was 6 years old when he disappeared in New York City on May 26, 1979. In 2017, Pedro Hernandez was convicted of kidnapping and murdering Aiden, but his body has never been found. I remember hearing about this woman who claimed to be Jennifer Klein not too long after it happened. I couldn't find much solid information on it other than some social media speculation, but I think her claim was debunked pretty quickly. But what happened to Kurt Newton? There are a few theories that he wandered too far and too deep into the woods to be found, fell into a body of water, or was in fact abducted. The most talked about theory I've seen is that he was killed by a wild animal. There was a report that a captive bear had been released in the area just before Kurt was last seen, and some people have suggested a mountain lion was responsible. However, based on what I've read, I don't think it's likely this would have happened without leaving evidence behind, such as a substantial amount of blood. I've also seen claims that the police had tunnel vision in this case. Remember, at the start, they were convinced he was simply lost in the woods and didn't seem to consider other possibilities very much. Did Kurt really end up so far and deep into the woods that it was impossible for him to be found, even with the meticulous search that was performed? Or did someone really take him and leave no trace behind? Kurt Ronald Newton was last seen on August 31, 1975, at Natanus Point Campground in Chain of Ponds Township, Maine. His case is classified as a non-family abduction. At the time of his disappearance, Kurt was 4 years old. 3 feet 1 inch tall, and 35 pounds. He's a white male with strawberry blonde hair and blue eyes. He was last seen wearing a navy blue jacket with baseballs on it, a navy blue sweatshirt with the word Manchester across the front, a red jersey, red and black corduroy pants, mismatched white socks, and brown shoes. If alive today, he would be 49 years old. If you have any information on the disappearance of Kurt Newton, you can contact the Maine State Police at 207-289-2155. You can also contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. So that's all I have for you today on Kurt Newton. This case reminds me a little bit of Stephen Damon, whose case I covered a few months ago. They're both young boys who disappeared decades ago and seemingly without a trace. I've also seen it compared to the case of Dior Kuntz Jr., who disappeared from a campground in Idaho in 2015. It seems like investigators did everything they could to find Kurt, at least in the woods, and the fact that virtually nothing was found on him makes this one of the strangest cases I've covered so far. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.